Hello everyone, I am the Storyteller Daily. Tonight I bring you stories that may help you drift into sleep. Before we begin, please remember to like and subscribe so you won't miss the next journey into the shadows. And leave a comment to tell me, where are you listening from and at what time of night? Now close your eyes, breathe slowly. Let your thoughts sink beneath the surface and step with me into the first story. I first stepped into the house on a night when the air outside was too restless for sleep. The villa had stood for over a century, its windows shuttered, its garden consumed by ivy. Inside, the silence pressed heavy, except for the faint rustle of fabric, as though velvet were being drawn across glass. I carried only a lantern. Its dim flame revealed portraits with eyes that seemed to follow me and furniture swaddled in yellowing sheets. But in the grand hall at the foot of the staircase stood the largest mirror I had ever seen, covered by a thick curtain of wine-red velvet. The air around it felt colder, sharper, as if the fabric itself breathed. I told myself it was only the draft from broken shutters. Yet as I reached the first step, a sound rose behind me, a single, deliberate tap, like a fingernail against glass. I froze, the lantern trembling in my grip. The house remained silent, but the mirror waited at my back. The echo of that tap lingered in my ears long after it had faded. I turned sharply, lantern raised, expecting to catch some loose shutter swinging in the draft. But the hall was empty, still cloaked in the hush of long abandonment. I tried to dismiss it. Old houses creak, echoes play tricks, yet the sound had not been random. It had been precise, a tap placed with intention, fingernail against glass. I climbed the staircase slowly, each step protesting beneath my weight. The lantern flame quivered, throwing restless shadows across the peeling wallpaper. From above I could hear the drip of water leaking through cracked plaster, but underneath that came another sound, the faint, dragging sigh of fabric being pulled taut, the velvet curtain. The more I listened, the more it resembled breathing, drawn in, then released. I found myself glancing back at the mirror, though it was hidden beneath the heavy cloth. My own reflection should not have been visible. Yet I felt as though someone stood there, mimicking each motion of my body, patient and unseen. In the corridor above, the air grew stale, thick with dust and something sweeter, like wilted roses. Portraits lined the walls, each depicting stern figures from another age. In more than one, the women's eyes seemed rimmed with grief, black veils draped over their shoulders. A sudden coldness touched the back of my neck, sharp enough to make me flinch. I spun, but the corridor was empty. Only silence. Only dust. I told myself my imagination was feeding on shadows. Still, I could not shake the thought that the tap had not come from the hall at all. It had come from inside the mirror. I descended quickly, lantern swinging. The great velvet curtain swayed faintly, though no breeze stirred. My heart beat hard against my ribs. I stepped closer, every instinct urging me to flee, yet compelled by a dreadful curiosity. My fingers reached toward the fabric. Just before they brushed it, I heard it again. Tap, 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 from the other side. I stood before the velvet curtain, lantern raised, heart rattling like a bird trapped in a cage. The tapping had not ceased. It came again, measured and deliberate. 3 times. A pause. Then again in the same rhythm. As if someone or something was signaling. I whispered to myself that the house was merely settling, that the echoes I heard were tricks of wood and stone, but the sound was not scattered, it was focused, precise, and it came from the mirror as surely as a knock at a door. The lantern's glow caught the edges of the curtain, and I saw it move. Not the gentle stir of fabric in a draft, but a pulse, as though something pressed from within. The folds bulged outward, then relaxed. I held my breath, listening. There came a scrape, light yet deliberate, like nails trailing across the inner surface of glass. The sound dragged from one corner of the mirror to the other. Then silence, heavy and expectant. I retreated a step, but the house refused to release me. From somewhere above, the portraits creaked in their frames. From the floorboards beneath my feet rose the faintest vibration, as if the entire house leaned toward that mirror. And then came the whisper, soft, muffled, yet clear enough that I knew it was a voice. Words blurred by distance, by barriers I could not see, but spoken in a tone of longing. A woman's voice, frail and mournful. I strained to hear, the syllables repeated, faint as breath against glass. My name. She was calling my name. The lantern shook in my hand. I had never spoken my name aloud within these walls. And yet she knew. The tapping resumed, now in harmony with the whisper. Tap, tap, followed by a breathy murmur of my name. Louder each time, synchronized, insistent. I pressed my free hand against my ear, but the sound was inside me, reverberating through bone and blood. The mirror began to hum. At first I thought it the lantern's flame guttering, but the vibration grew, a low thrumming that resonated in my chest. It built like the strike of a bow across the strings of a cello, rising until I feared the glass would shatter. I staggered back, gasping, the sound filling the entire hall. The velvet curtain trembled violently as though something behind it pounded with fists, demanding release. Dust cascaded from the ceiling, the portraits rattled in their frames. Through the din came the scrape again, claws on glass, drawn with desperate force. It carved a line I could almost see, traced from the inside outward. I stumbled against the stair rail, my lantern throwing long, violent shadows across the hall. Each shadow seemed to stretch toward the mirror, pointing at it, urging me forward. The pounding grew more frantic, tap, 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 faster, harder, until it became a constant rattle. And then, as suddenly as it began, it stopped. The silence that followed was worse than the noise. My ears rang, but no sound replaced the absence. The air was thick, suffocating. I lowered the lantern. The velvet curtain now hung still, but its surface bulged in the outline of a hand, pressed firmly from the other side. The fabric stretched with the imprint of long, thin fingers, and the hand began to push through. The outline of the hand pressed harder, distorting the curtain outward. The velvet strained as if stretched by something both fragile and unyielding. My lantern flame sputtered, protesting the sudden weight of the air. I wanted to flee, yet some dreadful magnet held me there. The hand withdrew, leaving only a faint sag in the fabric. For a heartbeat I thought it was over, but whatever haunted the mirror had retreated. Then came the sound again, not tapping this time, but a deep drag like a nail gouging into wood. The curtain quivered as though being sliced from the inside, and then, impossibly, the fabric tore. A thin line split down the velvet, glowing faintly with a silver sheen from the glass beneath. From the tear emerged fingers, pale, elongated, with nails blackened like ash. They groped blindly for the air, flexing as if testing freedom. I cried out and stumbled backward, nearly dropping the lantern. The flame flickered wildly, shadows whipping across the hall. I could not tear my gaze from the sight. One finger, then another, curled around the edge of the fabric and pulled. The curtain peeled back with a slow rasp, unveiling the mirror beneath. And there she was. A woman in a widow's gown, her face half shrouded in lace, eyes hollow as burnt-out stars. Her lips moved without sound, but the air filled with whispers nonetheless. seeping through my mind like smoke. She leaned against the inner surface of the mirror as if it were water, her hands leaving streaks of frost on the glass. I stumbled to the staircase, desperate to put distance between us. The lantern light danced on her reflection, though the flames seemed to burn dimmer in her presence. The whispers grew clearer now, her lips shaping words that needed no breath to reach me. "Let me out! Let me out!" My rational mind screamed that it was impossible, that mirrors did not hold the dead, yet my body felt her grief, her hunger. She pressed harder, the glass bowing outward, as if it were thin ice, ready to give way. I turned and fled up the staircase, boots hammering the warped wood. Behind me came a thunderous crack, like glass splintering. The whispers became a wail, high-pitched and furious, rattling the chandeliers until dust showered down. At the top of the landing, I looked back once, against my better judgment. The mirror's surface had fractured, silver veins spidering outward. And through those cracks her arm reached, elbow and all, dragging herself into my world. I dashed down the corridor, the portraits glaring with lifeless eyes as I passed. My lantern threatened to extinguish with each stride, smoke curling inside the glass. From below rose the sound of shattering glass, then the unmistakable rhythm of footsteps, hers. Not the hesitant shuffle of a ghost, but deliberate steps measured against mine. She was following. I ducked into a side chamber, a library suffocating under the weight of mildew. Books slumped on shelves, their spines peeling. I pressed my back to the wall, holding the lantern close to my chest. The footsteps slowed. They entered the corridor, echoing in dreadful patience. She did not rush. She was certain I could not leave. The air cooled, the lantern's flame shrinking to a trembling pin of light. I dared to peek around the doorframe. The corridor was empty, yet I knew she was there. The whispers threaded through the silence. "You look like him. You belong here." I stumbled back, knocking into a desk, but groaned under the weight of rot. The sound betrayed me. The footsteps resumed, quickening now, turning toward the chamber where I hid. My pulse hammered. I searched for escape, a window nailed shut, shelves too tall to climb, no way out. And then I saw it, in the corner of the room, propped against the wall, another mirror. Smaller, its surface clouded with dust. The whispers ceased, replaced by silence so absolute that even the lantern seemed to hush. And from that mirror, faint and dreadful, came the sound of tapping. The tapping from the smaller mirror grew louder, quick as a pulse. My lantern trembled in my hand, flames stretching high, then guttering low, as though it too responded to the rhythm. I wanted to smash the glass, to silence it, but the thought of releasing another figure filled me with dread. Instead, I backed away, clutching the lantern close. The footsteps in the corridor had ceased. The whispers that had haunted me since the hall were gone. For the first time since stepping into the villa, there was stillness. I pressed my back to the wall, sliding down until I sat on the dusty floorboards. My breath came hard, rasping in the quiet. I told myself she had returned to her prison, that whatever force bound her to the great mirror had pulled her back. My imagination had made monsters of shadows and whispers. Minutes dragged. The tapping faded to silence. The flame steadied. Slowly, the paralysis in my body loosened, and I began to believe escape was possible. I rose, scanning the library. The shelves leaned like weary sentinels, the air dense with mildew. A tall window overlooked the overgrown garden. With effort, I pried at the warped frame until it groaned open, letting in a draught of cold night air. Relief washed through me. I could leave. I could be done with this cursed house. I stepped toward the window, lantern raised, then stopped. The night outside was not empty. In the garden below I saw figures, dozens of them, women in black gowns, faces veiled, standing motionless among the ivy. Their heads tilted upward, every gaze fixed on the window where I stood. I staggered back, nearly dropping the lantern. The window slammed shut as if pulled by unseen hands. My relief curdled into terror. I turned to run and froze. The smaller mirror no longer stood clouded in dust. Its surface gleamed clear as water, and within it I saw myself, lantern in hand, trembling. Yet the reflection smiled, slowly, deliberately. I stumbled backward, striking the edge of the desk. The reflection lifted a finger and tapped against the inside of the glass. Once, twice, thrice, the same rhythm I had heard before. "No," I whispered, shaking my head. "That isn't me." But the reflection's smile widened, its lips moved soundlessly. Then the whisper returned, not from the hall, not from behind me, but from within my own chest. "Let me in." The lantern flickered violently. I dropped it in panic, flames scattering across the floor. Shadows leapt high along the shelves, smoke curled thick, carrying with it the scent of scorched fabric. Through the haze, the reflection reached forward, its hands pressing outward. The glass bowed like a thin sheet of ice, trembling under the strain. I grabbed the lantern and stumbled for the door, coughing against the smoke. Behind me, the glass cracked. First a hairline fracture, then a shattering chorus. The reflection was breaking free. I ran into the corridor, heart hammering, smoke spilling out behind me. The villa moaned with every step I took, beams groaning, portraits trembling in their frames. For a fleeting moment I thought I had outrun it. The air lightened, the whispers ceased, my footsteps echoed alone. But then, from every room I passed, every doorway yawning open in the dark, came the same sound. Tap, tap, tap. Not from one mirror, but from many. The corridor became a hall of echoes. Each door I passed throbbed with sound, as if every room held a mirror, each one awake, each one tapping in the same relentless rhythm. Tap, tap, tap. I clutched the lantern tight, stumbling forward, desperate for the staircase. Smoke still clung to me, the acrid sting of it burning my throat. Behind, the smaller mirror must have shattered completely, for I heard glass collapsing in a shriek that travelled through the house like thunder. The footsteps followed once more, measured, deliberate. She was not running, she had no need. The house itself carried her forward. I reached the landing, staring down the long stairwell. At the bottom, the grand mirror loomed, its curtain ripped wide, shards of glass scattered across the floor like frozen lightning. From within, the widow pulled herself free. Her veil dragged like smoke, her body too pale to be living, yet too heavy to be shadow. Her head rose, she saw me. The tapping exploded into pounding. Every wall, every floorboard, every window pane became a drum. The sound reverberated inside my chest, synchronizing with my heartbeat, until I could not tell which belonged to me. "Leave me!" I screamed, though my voice was swallowed by the din. She raised a hand. The air thickened, my limbs stiffening as though bound by invisible threads. I staggered, forcing one foot in front of the other, lanterns swinging wildly. Shadows leapt like predators along the ceiling. She mounted the first stair. The house groaned beneath her weight. Each step she took was echoed by a crack from the mirror shards below, as if the glass itself bled with her movement. Panic drove me. I turned and bolted down the corridor, seeking any escape. Doors slammed shut as I passed, gusts of icy air striking me from every side. The whispers chased me, multiplying into a chorus, pleading, mocking, commanding, "Stay, stay, stay." I crashed into the library again. Flames licked higher across the floorboards where the lantern had spilled earlier. The fire had spread, smoke thickening, filling the room with choking heat. And there she stood, not outside the mirror, not behind me, but within the fire's reflection on the cracked glass of the window. Her shape burned in orange and red, smiling with teeth too sharp to belong to grief. I screamed and hurled the lantern at the window. Glass shattered outward, fire curling into the night. Cold air rushed in, sweeping smoke from my lungs. Without thinking, I climbed through the broken frame, shards tearing at my coat, and fell hard into the garden below. I hit the ground on my side. The wind knocked from me. Above, the villa loomed, its windows flickering with firelight. The tapping had not ceased. It pulsed from the walls themselves, rattling the ivy, trembling through the soil. I tried to stand, legs quaking beneath me. Then I saw them. The women in black gowns. The veiled figures I had glimpsed before. They stood in the garden still, encircling me now, faces hidden but bodies rigid, as if awaiting command. Their heads turned in unison toward the broken window. And there she was, the widow herself, leaning from the shattered frame. Her veil billowed, her eyes fixed upon me. She raised a hand, and the veiled figures began to move. I staggered back, searching wildly for escape. Beyond the overgrown garden stood the rusted gate, half buried in weeds. Beyond that, the open road. I ran. Branches tore at me, brambles clawing my arms. The veiled figures glided silently, keeping pace, their gowns whispering across the grass. Behind them, the widow's scream tore through the night, a sound that was not grief, but hunger. My legs burned, lungs searing. I reached the gate, wrenching at the rusted latch until it gave with a shriek. I forced myself through, collapsing onto the gravel road. The pounding ceased. For the first time, silence fell. The villa stood behind me, firelight flickering in its windows, smoke trailing into the sky. No footsteps followed, no whispers chased me. I was outside, I had escaped. Or so I thought, because as I staggered to my feet, breath heaving, I heard it again. Faint, but clear, impossibly close. Tap, tap, tap. Not from the house, not from behind me, but from the lantern still clutched in my hand. I froze on the gravel road, lantern trembling in my grip. The flame inside burned low, barely alive, yet from its thin glass came the sound again, tap, tap, tap. My first instinct was to smash it against the stones, to be rid of the cursed thing, but when I raised it, I saw what lay reflected in the curved glass of the lantern's casing. Not my face, hers. The widow's veiled countenance stared back at me, lips moving in silent rhythm with the tapping. The cracked distortion of the glass stretched her smile into something inhuman. I stumbled back, nearly dropping the lantern, but some terrible pull anchored it to my hand. The flame swelled suddenly, flaring bright enough to scorch my skin through the handle. The whispers returned, seeping through the night air as though carried on smoke. You are mine now. You opened the way. Desperate, I hurled the lantern into the weeds. It shattered, fire sputtering across the roadside. For a breath, silence reigned. I thought I had destroyed her hold. Then came the light. In each shard of broken glass, her image appeared. Dozens of her, veiled heads tilting, mouths opening in a soundless chorus. And from every fragment rose the same rhythm. Tap, tap, tap. I backed away, heart pounding, yet the road ahead glistened with broken reflections, as though the world itself had become one vast mirror. And in every surface she moved closer. The innkeeper's warning was simple. Do not open the window after midnight. She spoke it in a hushed tone, eyes darting toward the heavy shutters as though afraid they might overhear. I laughed politely, chalking it up to village superstition. But when she placed the iron key in my hand, her fingers lingered, trembling. The Mountain Inn was quiet, its corridors lined with faded carpets and wooden beams that groaned in the wind. My room smelled faintly of cedar, the shutters bolted tight against the night. I settled into bed, listening to the muffled hiss of snow against the glass. Sleep came lightly, broken by sounds too delicate to belong to a storm. A faint tap against the window pane, then another, softer, almost like the brushing of feathers. I sat up, straining to hear. The tapping stopped. Silence returned. I lay back, exhaling, only to feel it then. A breath, warm, deliberate, at the back of my neck. I jerked upright, hand flying to the back of my neck. There was nothing, only the chill of the room and the faint rustle of wind against the shutters. My heart hammered far too loudly for such a small disturbance. I told myself it was imagination, that the innkeeper's words had planted seeds in my tired mind. Yet the silence was wrong, too perfect, too heavy. Even the storm seemed to have retreated, leaving the night unnaturally still. I rose from the bed, carrying the oil lamp with me. Its weak glow painted the wooden beams gold, shadows stretching long across the floor. I pressed my ear to the shutters. Nothing. No wind, no branches, no storm. Only my own breathing, shallow and uneven. Then came the faintest sound, not tapping this time. A scrape, like a fingernail trailing lazily down the outside of the wood. My stomach turned cold. I pulled back sharply, staring at the bolts. They held fast, thick iron that had weathered decades. I should have felt secure behind them, but instead I felt trapped. The innkeeper's warning gnawed at me now. Do not open the window after midnight. She had spoken with the gravity of someone who had seen what comes when the rule is broken. I set the lamp on the table, trying to steady my hands. Perhaps it was another guest, drunk and wandering. Perhaps children playing a cruel trick. I told myself any excuse I could muster, but then the sound came again, longer this time. A drag that ended in a sharp click, as if something hard had tapped once, deliberately. The lamp flickered, smoke curling up the glass. I turned in a slow circle, scanning the room. The wardrobe creaked softly, though I had not touched it. The bed covers shifted, though no draught stirred them. I whispered into the empty room, my voice unsteady. "Who's there?" No reply. Only the faint hiss of the lamp. Then, faint but unmistakable, a sound rose above it. A voice. Just outside the shutters. Low, melodic, intimate, like someone standing close enough to kiss the wood. It spoke only a single word, my name. At first, I thought the voice was a dream, bleeding into waking. My name, spoken in a tone both tender and commanding. I froze, heart battering against my ribs, straining to hear. The shutters trembled faintly, though no wind pressed against them. Then came the sound again, my name, whispered slowly, drawn out like the promise of a secret. I backed away, shaking my head. "No, you're not real." But the voice persisted, lower now, coaxing, almost affectionate. Each syllable brushed across the wood like fingertips. My name repeated, threaded through with a hunger I could not mistake. The lamp guttered, flame shrinking until the room lay in shadows. From that half-darkness came another sound, soft, rhythmic, as though someone outside dragged their nails gently across the glass. Scratch, scratch, pause. Then the unmistakable click of something sharp against the pane. I covered my ears, but it was useless. The voice slipped through, not just from the window, but from the walls themselves. It filled the room like a presence, pressing against my skin, into my veins. The words shifted, now weaving phrases I could barely grasp. "Let me in. You're cold. I can warm you. A terrible weariness crept over me. My limbs felt heavy, my eyelids slow to rise. It was as though the voice carried with it a drowsy fog, tugging me toward surrender. I staggered toward the door, fumbling with the latch. The hallway lay beyond, but when I pressed my ear to the wood, I heard nothing, no footsteps, no signs of life. The inn seemed abandoned, as though every soul had vanished into silence. The voice laughed softly, a sound both beautiful and terrifying. Then the tapping began again, faster now, urgent, tap, 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 in rhythm with my heartbeat. I clutched my chest, terrified at how quickly they matched, how I could not separate one from the other. The shutters rattled harder this time. I saw the bolt strain, dust raining from the beams above. Something outside was pushing, not pounding, but testing, teasing, as though it could open the way at any moment if I faltered. My body shook with cold. I realized then that the air had changed, no longer stale and warm, but icy, like standing before an open crypt. The flame of the lamp bent sharply toward the window, as though pulled by invisible breath. Then, with dreadful clarity, I heard the sound of wings, a single beat, vast and leathery, followed by another. The snow outside hissed as if struck by falling embers. The voice rose above the rustling wings, singing my name now in a cadence like prayer. It was closer, impossibly close, as though lips brushed the wood itself. And then came the sharpest sound yet. Not tapping, not scratching, but the decisive crack of wood splitting. The shutters moved, the bolts strained, the voice slipped into a hiss of satisfaction. Almost open, the bolts on the shutters groaned, bending against pressure from the other side. I stumbled back, lamp trembling in my hands. The voice was no longer soft, it rose in sharp bursts, each syllable like a command. My name again and again, spoken with a hunger that rattled the wood. The crack widened. A sliver of night leaked through, black, but not empty. Red gleamed faintly beyond the gap, pulsing like the glow of embers. And in that glow, I glimpsed the curve of a smile. I dropped the lamp onto the floorboards. Flames spilled out, scattering shadows. I didn't care. I lunged for the wardrobe, dragging it with all my strength toward the window. Wood screeched, heavy and unyielding, but desperation gave me force. I shoved it against the shutters just as the bolt gave way. The impact shook the frame, dust raining from the ceiling. For a heartbeat, silence. Then claws, long, deliberate, scraping down the wood of the wardrobe. A hiss, low and delighted, seeped through the cracks. I pressed myself to the door of the room, fumbling with the latch, but it resisted, as though the whole inn conspired to keep me trapped. Behind me, the wardrobe shuddered violently, pushed from without. The voice came again, now inches from me. "You're mine already. Let me taste it." I wrenched the door open and stumbled into the corridor. Darkness stretched in both directions. The inn was silent, every door shut tight. My breath tore ragged in the hush as I ran blindly down the hall, lamp swinging wildly, throwing fleeting shapes across the walls. Behind me came the sound of splintering wood. The wardrobe was breaking. I fled down the stairs, boots pounding. At the bottom lay the common room, empty tables and cold hearthstones. The air smelled faintly of iron, sharp and metallic. The front door was bolted. My fingers fumbled at the lock, but it was stiff with age, rust biting my skin. I turned desperately, searching for another way, and froze. Every window in the common room stood bare, shutters wide open as if someone had unlatched them all at once. Through the panes of glass the storm had stilled. Snow no longer fell. The world outside was red. Shapes moved beyond the windows, figures circling, some on the ground, some aloft, wings unfurling against a sky that pulsed like blood. Their eyes burned in the dark, glowing with the same ember light I had glimpsed upstairs. And in the center of them all stood one figure, taller, cloaked, its face hidden in shadow. Yet I felt its gaze pierce through the glass and into my marrow. The shutters upstairs crashed open, the wardrobe splintered in two, a rush of wings swept through the ceiling beams, rattling every board of the inn. And then, at my back, the common room door clicked shut. I spun. The innkeeper stood there, face pale as milk, eyes shining wet in the lamplight. Her lips parted, trembling, and she whispered with terrible reverence, "You've already invited him in." Her words struck colder than the night air outside. "You've already invited him in?" I backed away from the innkeeper, shaking my head. "No, I never—" She raised her trembling hands. "To answer his voice is enough. To speak at all, you opened the way." Her eyes glistened, full of dread, but also something else. Resignation. She had seen this before. A roar of wind surged through the rafters, shaking the inn. I braced myself, but no windows shattered, no figure burst through. Instead, silence settled once more. The red glow beyond the panes dimmed, retreating into the snow. The innkeeper sagged against the wall, clutching a rosary of tarnished beads. Sometimes they pass. Sometimes they grow impatient and wait for another. "You may be spared." Her voice shook, but her words carried a fragile hope. I clung to it desperately. The silence felt almost gentle now, the heavy stillness of a storm that has rolled on. Perhaps she was right. Perhaps I had been seen, tested, but not chosen. My breath eased. I followed her to the hearth, where she struck flint until a flame caught. The firelight spread warmth through the common room, casting the shadows back. For the first time since arriving, the inn felt almost safe. We sat in silence, the crackle of wood our only company. She would not meet my eyes, but I understood. Speaking further of it risked summoning attention again. I told myself the night would pass. I would leave at dawn, descend the mountain, never return. The fire soothed me, drawing the tension from my limbs. My head grew heavy. My eyes closed for what I swore was only a moment. When I woke, the fire had burned low. The innkeeper was gone. I sat upright, heart pounding. The common room stood empty, chairs pushed in neatly, the rosary abandoned on the floor. "Hello," my voice cracked, too loud in the silence. No answer. Then, faint as a sigh, came a sound from the far end of the room. A soft tapping, not on the windows, but on the door behind the bar. Tap, tap, tap. I rose slowly, every muscle stiff. The bar door creaked open on its own, revealing a stairwell descending into blackness. Cold air spilled up from below, carrying with it the copper tang of blood. I told myself not to look, not to follow, but my feet betrayed me. Lantern in hand, I stepped toward the stairwell. The tapping continued, echoing from deep underground. And then, beneath the tapping, another sound reached me. A long, deliberate inhale, like lungs drawing their first breath after centuries of waiting. The stairwell yawned before me, a throat swallowing firelight into blackness. The tapping had quickened, beating like a second heart beneath the inn. My own pulse matched it, thudding louder with each step I forced downward. The air grew colder, heavier, the smell of iron thickened, coating my tongue. At the bottom of the steps lay a cellar lined with stone, its ceiling low, its walls slick with damp. Rows of casks and crates leaned in the shadows, and in the center stood a chair. A figure sat upon it, bound in rusted chains, the innkeeper. Her eyes lifted to mine, wide with terror. Her lips moved, trembling, but no sound came. She shook her head violently, as if warning me away. Before I could speak, the tapping surged from the walls themselves. The casks vibrated, wood creaking, nails squealing. From between them seeped shapes, dark, winged, unfurling as if pulled from cracks in the stone. Their eyes glowed like embers, their wings beating air, thick with dust. And then he emerged, tall, robed in crimson, his face half shrouded by a hood. Only his mouth was visible, pale lips that curved into a smile of endless hunger. "You heard me," he whispered, though his voice filled the cellar like a chorus. "You answered." "You are mine," I stumbled back, lantern held high. The light shook, barely holding the dark at bay. The creatures circled, wings brushing the stone, claws scraping sparks. The innkeeper sobbed behind her gag, thrashing against her bonds. He stepped forward, each movement precise, regal. His feet did not stir dust. His shadow stretched unnaturally, reaching toward me like a living thing. "Come," he said. His voice carried no anger, only certainty. "Your blood has already quickened for me." I screamed and hurled the lantern. It shattered at his feet, fire bursting across the damp stones. For a moment, the creatures shrieked, wings beating frantically. The flames roared, smoke boiling upward. I seized the chance, rushing to the innkeeper. My hands fumbled with the chains, pulling until my fingers bled, but they would not break. "Go!" she begged through the gag, voice muffled but desperate. "Leave me." I shook my head, but the fire dimmed already, snuffed by unseen force. The crimson figure walked through the smoke unscathed, smile unchanged. I had no choice. I tore up the stairs, boots slamming each rung. Behind me rose the thunder of wings, the hiss of laughter. The inn shook, beams groaning, dust raining down. I burst into the common room. The windows shattered inward all at once, glass spraying like knives. Figures poured through, veiled in black, eyes glowing. Their wings filled the space, blotting out the firelight. I ducked low, sprinting for the front door. My hands clawed at the bolts, tearing them loose. Wood splintered, metal shrieked, and finally the door gave way. Snow and night air blasted in, searing my lungs. I stumbled into the open, falling to my knees on the frozen ground. The storm had returned, snow whipping sideways, obscuring the crimson glow of the sky. For a heartbeat, the inn stood silent behind me. Then the roof collapsed. Flames roared upward, wings shrieked, voices rose in furious hunger. I ran, stumbling through the snow, every breath a ragged wound in my chest. The storm howled, but I kept running, until the glow of the burning inn faded into darkness. I collapsed beside a half-buried milestone, gasping, sobbing, alive. The wind screamed overhead, no wings followed, no whispers chased me. I had escaped, at least for now, because when I pressed my hand to the cold stone for balance, I felt it, a rhythm pulsing faintly beneath the surface, tap, tap, tap. I pressed my ear against the milestone, hoping the tapping was only the blood rushing through my temples. But no, it was steady, foreign, echoing deep beneath the stone, as though the mountain itself had a heartbeat. The snow thinned for a moment, wind parting just enough to reveal a dark silhouette further down the road. A figure stood there, cloaked against the storm, perfectly still. I whispered to myself it was a traveller, another soul caught in the night. Yet the truth came clear as the figure lifted its head. Eyes burned faintly red through the snow. The storm hushed, as if listening. The tapping ceased. Then, carried by the stillness, his voice reached me, low, smooth, and inevitable. "You cannot run from an invitation." The figure took a step forward, snow melting around his boots. His shadow stretched long across the whiteness, reaching me before his body did. I turned, desperate to flee again, but froze. On the road ahead lay shards of glass glistening in the snow, though no mirror could have survived this far from the inn. And in each shard I saw my reflection, smiling. waiting. The storm swallowed my scream. The village church had been abandoned for decades, its roof sagging, its pews long since devoured by rot. Yet every night, as the clock neared midnight, the bells still tolled. No one dared go near it, except me. I told myself it was curiosity, nothing more. The villagers spoke of hangings carried out in secret, of ropes left swaying in the tower's rafters. They said the condemned still gathered when the bell rang, their footsteps echoing on stone. The night I entered, the wind was sharp enough to cut. My lantern cast long, trembling beams across the nave, revealing pews gnawed with wormholes, hymn books rotted to pulp. The silence inside pressed against my ears, thick and heavy. Then, from above, came the first sound, the groan of the great bell shifting in its frame. Wood cracked, metal sighed, and the chain rattled as though pulled by unseen hands. The lantern trembled in my grip. The bell should have been still, yet the sound grew louder, more insistent, a low, rising hum that seemed to vibrate in my bones. And then, unmistakable, a single, deliberate footstep on the floor above. I stood frozen at the base of the staircase, my lantern raised, toward the wooden steps spiraling upward. That footstep had been too heavy for settling beams, too deliberate to be dismissed as the groan of old wood. "Hello!" My voice cracked in the hollow nave. It came back to me in a broken echo, stripped of strength. No answer. I tried to laugh at myself. Perhaps it was birds roosting in the rafters, or some vagabond sheltering from the wind. But the sound had weight, purpose. The bell gave a faint tremor above, metal brushing against its cradle, producing a low moan that resonated in my ribs. The silence that followed was suffocating, pressing harder with each second. I set one foot on the stair. The wood groaned beneath me, dust falling in lazy spirals. My lantern's flame wavered, stretching shadows that clung to the walls like dark vines. Another step, another. My heart drummed louder than my boots, and then I heard it again. A footstep, not mine. Slow, careful, directly above me. I froze mid-step, clutching the railing. The two sounds overlapped, my breath shallow, my lantern rattling against its frame, and something else, pacing me one floor higher. I strained to listen. The silence stretched thin until the faintest sound bled through, a rope creaking, swinging in an unseen draught. I told myself it was the wind, but the night outside had stilled, the air unmoving. This sound was closer, sharper, like weight, shifting against hemp. The stories clawed at my thoughts. Condemned men hanging in the tower, their final gasps forever tied to the bell's toll. I climbed faster, each step protesting under my boots. The spiral carried me higher into the darkness. The stone walls closed in, slick with moss, the air colder with every turn. Then came the whisper, faint, almost smothered by the beating of my heart. A chorus of voices, layered and broken, speaking too low for me to make out words. Yet I knew with dreadful certainty they spoke to each other about me. The bell groaned again, this time louder. A shudder shook the tower, dust raining from the beams. My lantern flared, then nearly extinguished, struggling against an unseen gust. I looked up, and for the briefest instant, I saw it. A shadow hanging above the stairwell, swaying gently, its feet brushing the wood. Then the chain rattled sharply as though yanked by hands unseen. The bell was about to strike. The chain above shivered once more, its links clashing with a metallic cry. My lantern guttered, light bending across the spiral like water. I clutched it tighter, pressing forward, even as every part of me begged to turn back. The whispers grew clearer. They no longer rose like vague murmurs, but rolled in broken cadences, words threaded together in voices too many to count. Some muttered prayers, others groaned in agony. A few laughed, hollow and bitter. The sound circled the tower, chasing itself in endless loops. The rope creaked louder. I could almost see it swinging through the lantern barely reached the shadows above. With each groan of hemp, the air pressed heavier against my chest until it felt as though my own lungs were tethered to that unseen rope. Halfway up, the bell moaned again. A vibration, deep and aching, not a full strike, but a warning. It resonated through the stone, rattling dust from every crevice. My teeth chattered as the sound lodged inside my bones. I paused, gripping the railing. Another footstep came, not above this time, but directly behind me. I spun, raising the lantern. Nothing. The spiral lay empty, stone descending into black. When I turned back, there was movement on the stair just above, a shadow dragging itself slowly, weight hanging unevenly, feet brushing the wood with sickening patience. The whispers hushed. For a moment, the tower was silent, but for the scrape of that shadow's body against the steps. And then the bell struck. The sound ripped through me, enormous, violent, endless. It drowned every thought, every heartbeat. The lantern's flame leapt as though it too feared the resonance. The stone itself seemed to breathe with the toll, exhaling dust and ancient despair. The echo carried voices with it now, not whispers, but screams. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds. They layered atop the tolling, ragged and raw, until the tower became a chamber of agony. I clamped my hands to my ears, but the sound came from within, from marrow and blood. My knees buckled under the weight of it. Still I dragged myself up, step by agonizing step, as though compelled to meet what waited at the top. The rope swung above me, heavy with invisible burden. My lantern revealed flashes, a bare foot dangling, a twisted smile caught in the beam, a neck crooked unnaturally. And then darkness again, as though the shadows devoured what I had glimpsed. The toll came once more, shaking the beams, splintering the silence. My vision swam, my breath staggered, but something urged me onward. At last, I reached the final turn of the spiral. The belfry yawned open above, timbers blackened with age, the bell enormous, cracked along one edge. The chain swayed, rattling with each phantom swing, and on the floor, just before the final step, lay a noose, its rope coiled neatly, waiting. I stumbled back, nearly tripping, but the voices surged again, rising in unison. "Take it! Wear it! Join us!" The bell gave one final thunderous strike. My lantern burst, glass shattering, flames snuffed in an instant, and in the sudden dark I felt the rough fibers of the noose brush against my neck. The coarse rope brushed my skin again, more insistent this time, curling like a hand that sought to tighten. I lurched backward, batting at the air, but the noose rose with me as though guided by invisible fingers. The bell above groaned and shifted. Dust fell in choking clouds, stinging my eyes. And then footsteps, not one but many. They echoed from the beams, from the rafters, from the very stones. The spiral stair shook beneath me as though countless bodies climbed it at once. I raised my broken lantern, its glass shattered, but wick still glowing faintly. The weak light showed shapes in the belfry, shadows swaying gently, suspended in mid-air. Dozens of them, each with a rope biting into its neck, each with feet brushing soundlessly against the planks, their heads jerked toward me in unison. The whispers became screams. I bolted forward into the chamber, hoping distance might save me, but the ropes swung down suddenly, striking like whips. One lashed across my arm, burning my skin with icy fire. Another looped my shoulder, tugging me back. "No!" My voice cracked as I tore free, stumbling beneath the bell itself. Its cracked mouth loomed above me, trembling as though alive. The figures closed in, swaying nearer, ropes stretching impossibly long to reach me. Faces bloated, eyes bulging, tongues swollen black, yet every mouth moved in grotesque harmony. "Join us!" The noose at my feet lifted again, writhing like a serpent. It slipped over my head before I could react, tightening around my throat with sudden force. My vision blurred, stars bursting at the edges. I clawed at the rope, gasping. The figures swayed closer, their ropes tangling together, their bodies merging into one towering shadow. The bell trembled above, vibrating with a terrible anticipation. With the last of my strength, I staggered to the side and grabbed the broken lantern. I hurled it against the timber frame. The weak flame caught on splintered wood, smoke rising fast. For a moment, the ropes loosened. The shadow figures recoiled, shrieking without breath. The noose slackened enough for me to tear it free, gasping in ragged gulps. The fire spread quickly across the dry beams. The belfry filled with smoke, swirling among the ropes and shadows. The bell shook harder, chains rattling as though the tower itself would tear apart. I stumbled toward the spiral stairs, coughing, eyes streaming. But as I reached the threshold, the bell struck again. The sound was deafening, physical. It knocked me to my knees, vision white with pain. And when it cleared, I saw them. Every shadowy figure now standing on the steps, blocking my escape. Their ropes dangled loose, but their heads still tilted at impossible angles. One of them stepped forward, its swollen lips split into a grin, and in my own voice it whispered, "You belong to the tower now." The shadows blocked the stairwell, their heads lolling on broken necks, their ropes trailing like veins of smoke. I pressed myself against the wall, coughing through the fire's haze, desperate for air. The figures moved as one, stepping closer. The bell above shuddered, preparing for another strike. My ears rang already, my lungs screamed. If it tolled again, I knew I would not rise. Then, a crack. The beam supporting the bell splintered under the fire's heat. Flames surged upward, licking the iron. With a groan like thunder, the cracked bell shifted in its cradle. The shadows faltered, their movements jerky, uncertain, and then it fell. The great bell plunged from its mount, smashing into the floorboards with a scream of tearing wood and shrieking iron. The shock wave burst outward, knocking the figures back into the smoke. For a moment, the chamber was chaos, fire, dust, collapsing timbers. I seized the chance. With every ounce of strength, I stumbled past the writhing shadows and onto the stairwell. Step by step, I descended, half blinded, gripping the wall as the tower shook itself apart. The whispers receded behind me. The ropes no longer sought my throat. When I reached the nave again, silence greeted me. Only the distant roar of fire above, the occasional crash of falling stone. I collapsed against a pew, coughing, trembling. I was alive. Against all odds, I had escaped the tower's grip. Through the cracked windows, I saw the night sky, calm, indifferent. Snow drifted in quiet flakes, erasing the world in white. I laughed then, weak and broken, but filled with a desperate relief. The bell tower groaned. Part of the roof gave way, flames bursting upward like a funeral pyre. It would burn itself to ashes, I told myself, and with it the spirits would be gone. I turned toward the church's great door. It loomed tall, its iron hinges warped but intact. I pushed with my shoulder and it opened grudgingly. Cold air washed over me. Freedom. I staggered outside, boots crunching against the snow. The night felt impossibly vast, silent except for the crackling fire behind me. My breath rose in white plumes. Each one felt like proof that I still belonged to the living. The church bells would never ring again. The curse had ended, or so I thought. For as I turned back for one final look, I saw movement through the flames. Shadows swayed still, their ropes glowing like molten chains. And then faint but unmistakable carried on the night wind. The slow, deliberate toll of a bell. The bell should not have tolled. It lay shattered on the floor above. I had seen it fall. Yet the sound rippled through the night, long and deep. vibrating in my chest until my knees buckled in the snow. The flames raged in the tower, but they did not consume the shadows. Through the gaping windows I saw them sway, countless figures dangling in unison, their ropes aflame yet unburning. Their heads turned toward me, even from a distance, eyes hollow pits, glowing faintly in the firelight. The toll came again. Boom! My ribs shook. The ground trembled beneath my boots. I staggered away from the church, snow crunching, lungs searing. The wind rose sharp, biting at my skin, but it carried with it the stench of rope and ash. Each step felt heavier, as though unseen hands dragged at my limbs. Behind me, the ruined door burst open. Shadows poured out, their bodies half-formed, trailing nooses that scraped across the snow. They moved silently, but with dreadful certainty, ropes dragging like serpents. Each footstep I took was mirrored by theirs, dozens of them closing in. I broke into a run. My breath came ragged, clouding in frantic bursts. The graveyard lay ahead, crooked stones jutting from the snow like teeth. I weaved between them, slipping, stumbling, forcing myself onward. But the toll of the bell followed. Each strike shook the air, staggering me mid-stride. With every toll, one of the figures appeared closer, no longer gliding, but stepping impossibly fast. I tripped over a headstone, crashing hard into the snow. My hands burned, my breath knocked from me. When I looked up, one shadow loomed inches away. Its noose dangled, swaying gently, waiting. I scrambled back, grabbing a broken wooden cross half buried in the drift. With a desperate cry, I swung. The wood passed through the figure as though through smoke. But the rope reacted. It coiled, thrashing like a struck serpent. The shadow recoiled, shrieking in silence. I ran again, clutching the splintered cross, heart hammering. But more ropes lashed toward me, writhing from the dark, seeking my throat, my wrists, my legs. I hacked wildly, striking wood against hemp, sparks of cold fire bursting where they met. The bell tolled once more, deafening, unstoppable. My vision blurred. The snow beneath me shuddered, splitting in jagged cracks. From below rose more ropes, clawing up from the earth itself, wrapping around stones, clawing for me. "No!" I screamed, tearing free, stumbling toward the tree line. Branches clawed at me as I burst into the forest. The shadows did not falter. They followed, weaving between trunks, ropes, snaking through the branches like living veins. The woods bent under the weight of their presence. Snow fell in heavy sheets, branches cracked, owls shrieked and fled. Still I forced myself forward, every stride a prayer. At last, through the blur of storm and smoke, I glimpsed a light. Faint, flickering, a lantern. I ran toward it with all that remained in me, bursting into a clearing where the light swung gently on a post. It illuminated a narrow road winding down the mountain, a path away from the tower. I collapsed beside it, clutching the post, sobbing, gasping. The shadows halted at the tree line, their nooses swaying like pendulums. They did not cross. The bell tolled again, distant now, muffled by the storm. But the sound lingered inside me, carved into my bones. I staggered to my feet and began down the road, every step an agony, every breath a victory. The shadows watched, but did not follow, for now I was free. Or so I prayed, because when the wind shifted, it carried with it the faint rattle of chains and the echo of a rope creaking in the branches above me. The mountain road wound downward, narrow and treacherous, but I dared not slow. Each step crunched against snow loud enough to betray me. I told myself the shadows had remained at the tree line, tethered to the burning tower. Yet the silence was wrong, the storm had hushed. The forest stood unnaturally still, branches rigid, the snow frozen in mid-fall. My breath billowed in clouds too loud for the hush. The only other sound was the faint groan of wood above me. I looked up. A rope swung gently from a branch overhanging the road. No figure hung from it, yet it swayed as though freshly cut down. The fibers creaked with each swing, a sound horribly familiar. I staggered back, heart hammering. Another rope hung further down the road, and another, each one twisting in the still air, forming a path that led deeper into the dark. The toll of the bell came again, impossibly distant, yet piercing. Not from the church, not from the valley, from the trees themselves. Each rope vibrated with the sound, thrumming like strings on a great, mournful instrument. I covered my ears, but the toll rose within me, rattling my teeth, choking my breath. My vision swam, and then, at the edge of my sight, I saw them. Shadows swaying among the trees, necks bent, eyes fixed upon me. The bell tolled once more. This time, it was my name it called. They told me never to answer a whistle at night. The villagers spoke of a road that wound through bamboo groves and old burial mounds, a road that sang when the wind was still. If you walked it after dusk and heard a whistle, you were to keep silent, no matter how it tempted you. I had laughed at their warnings. A road was a road, I told myself, but on the night I travelled it, the air was unnaturally calm. Not a single leaf stirred. My boots pressed into gravel that seemed to echo far louder than it should. Then it came. A whistle, high and clear, carrying through the stillness. It rose from just ahead, though the road stretched empty in the moonlight. I froze, heart hammering. The sound came again, softer this time, like someone calling playfully from just out of sight. The notes bent strangely as though the tune knew my name. I gripped my lantern tighter. The air seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see if I would answer. And before I could move on, another whistle floated back, this time from behind me. The second whistle drifted through the air, softer than the first, but far too deliberate to be the wind. I spun around, lantern trembling in my hand. The road behind lay empty, stretching pale under the moon, flanked by walls of bamboo. The groves whispered faintly, not with the breeze, but with their own weight shifting, stalks rubbing against one another. The sound was brittle, like bone brushing bone. I tried to steady my breathing. Perhaps hunters lingered nearby, or children testing the courage of travellers. Yet the village had lain miles behind. No one should be out here at this hour. I pressed on, boots grinding against gravel, lantern casting a small, flickering circle of safety around me. The silence returned, oppressive, until my own footsteps felt too loud, as though something else were matching their rhythm in perfect mimicry. Then it came again, a whistle, long and low from the grove to my left. The notes bent strangely, starting high before breaking off into a rasping sigh. The sound felt wrong, not playful this time, but coaxing, tempting. I gritted my teeth, refusing to answer. The villagers' warnings clawed at my memory. Do not respond, do not whistle back. But the sound persisted, a short, sharp note, followed by two rising tones. It repeated again and again like a call and response, begging to be completed. I quickened my pace, shoulders tight, eyes fixed on the road ahead. Each time my lantern swayed, shadows darted between the bamboo stalks, thin and quick, vanishing when I turned to look. The path curved, rising slightly, leading toward an old stone marker I had been told once marked the boundary of the burial mounds. Moss covered its surface, the carved characters long eroded. My light brushed across it, revealing gouges fresh as claw marks. The whistling ceased. For a moment, relief surged through me. The silence returned, heavy but empty. I thought perhaps I had left it behind. Then, clear as day from the darkness ahead, my name. Not spoken, but whistled. The sound of my name whistled through the bamboo, long and careful, as though shaped by lips unseen. I froze, lantern trembling in my hand, blood cold in my veins. The villager's warning echoed in my head. Do not answer. But my name carried a weight no stranger should know. The whistle was not random. It was directed at me, personal, intimate. I forced myself forward, boots crunching the gravel in hurried rhythm. My light swayed, scattering shadows across the road. For a few precious steps nothing followed, no sound but my breath. Then came another whistle, this time from the grove on my right. 3 short notes, sharp and mocking, followed by silence so deep I could hear my heartbeat thundering in my ears. I clenched my jaw and pressed on. But the road seemed longer than before, the path stretching unnaturally, the stone marker now a pale speck that refused to grow closer. The bamboo rattled without wind. Leaves shivered, dry and sharp, as though something unseen brushed through them. My lantern flame quivered in sympathy. Another whistle pierced the night, this one higher, broken halfway, almost like laughter. It was joined by another, deeper, echoing from behind. 2 voices, then 3, then more. The air filled with whistling from every direction, overlapping, weaving into a discordant chorus. Some called playfully, some groaned low, some bent into strange, inhuman pitches. Yet threaded through them all, clear and relentless, was my name, repeated again and again. My legs carried me faster, nearly running now. Sweat slicked my palms, lantern jerking wildly in my grasp. The road beneath me seemed to buckle, gravel sliding as though I ran across something breathing beneath the earth. A sudden break in the chorus made me stumble. All the whistling stopped at once. The silence crashed down like water. And in that stillness I heard footsteps, not mine. They came from the grove, heavy and slow, crunching in rhythm with my own. Each time I paused, they paused. Each time I quickened, they matched me. The road marker loomed closer now, its gouged surface catching the lantern glow. Relief surged until I saw what lay beyond. The path split in 2. One branch curved uphill into deeper bamboo. The other dipped toward the mounds where crooked stones jutted like teeth. From the upper path came a whistle, long and low, beckoning. From the lower path came another, sharp and playful. Both whistled my name, both waited for me to choose. I staggered between them, light flaring, lungs seizing. Then, from the darkness behind me, came a third whistle. This one was different. It was my own voice. The whistle in my own voice cut deeper than any blade. I spun around, lantern flaring, light spilling across the gravel road and into the bamboo groves. Nothing moved, yet the sound lingered in the air, hanging like smoke. No, I whispered, shaking my head. That wasn't me. The chorus began again, voices multiplying, some high, some low, some broken with laughter. They did not whistle now, they breathed, long drawn-out notes, forced through unseen mouths, bending in and out of tune. Each one shaped itself into my name, stretching the syllables until they scraped raw against my ears. The lantern flickered, its flame bent toward the lower path, as though pulled by an unseen draft. My gut twisted, warning me away. But before I could move, the bamboo on the upper path shuddered violently, stalks parting as if something large pressed through them. A figure emerged. At first I thought it human, a man hunched beneath a ragged cloak. But as he stepped into the glow, I saw his head tilt at an unnatural angle, jaw slack, lips pursed, as though forever whistling. His eyes were voids, dark and bottomless. He whistled again, my name, distorted, broken. I stumbled back, nearly dropping the lantern. My boots scraped against gravel, sending echoes bouncing into the grove. From the lower path, another figure stepped forth, this one taller, veiled in strips of tattered cloth that flapped, though no wind blew. Its whistle was higher, shriller, like a bird of prey mimicking human sound. Two of them now, both waiting, both beckoning. I turned to flee down the road I had come, but it was gone. The path behind had narrowed to nothing, swallowed by walls of bamboo that pressed in silently, sealing me inside. Panic clawed at me. I raised the lantern higher, its circle of light barely keeping the figures at bay. They shifted at the edge of its glow, shadows warping, bodies twitching unnaturally, as if strung on wires. The chorus swelled again, dozens of whistles from the groves, each one closer, sharper. My ears rang with the pressure. My chest heaved. My body pulled taut like a string ready to snap. I stumbled toward the stone marker, its gouged surface jagged beneath my fingers. I pressed against it, desperate for something solid, something real. The cold bit into my palms, but the sound did not cease. Then I realized the gouges were not random. They formed lines, grooves shaped like tally marks, countless tallies etched deep, climbing every side of the stone. One for each traveller who had walked this road, one for each who had not returned. The figures stepped closer, their whistling rising into a fevered pitch. My lantern flame guttered low, choking in the thick air. Shadows lengthened, reaching for me across the gravel. I forced myself forward, away from the marker, onto the only path that remained open, the one leading down toward the burial mounds. The air thickened with rot, heavy and wet. Stone markers jutted up in uneven rows, each one cracked, tilted, half swallowed by earth. The whistling followed me, circling from grave to grave, notes bending until they became a single, unending scream of breath. And then silence. The figures no longer stood at the grove's edge. They stood among the graves now, closer, watching, waiting. The graves stretched endlessly before me, crooked stones jutting like broken teeth. My lantern sputtered, its flame dim, but the figures had halted at the edges of the burial ground. They stood frozen, heads tilted, lips pursed, but silent at last. For the first time since the journey began, the night was quiet. Only the rasp of my breath and the faint creak of bamboo carried through the air. I stumbled between the graves, boots sinking in soft earth, body trembling with exhaustion. Perhaps this place, the resting ground, was sacred, a boundary even they could not cross. Relief trickled through me, fragile but real. I collapsed against a lichen-crusted stone, letting the lantern rest at my side. Its glow spilled across the names carved faintly into the surface. The letters were too eroded to read, but I traced them with trembling fingers as though they might anchor me to something human. The silence held. The figures did not follow. My heart slowed. I almost wept with gratitude. For the first time I allowed myself to close my eyes. The chill of the earth seeped into my bones, but it felt honest, unlike the false warmth of those whistled voices. Minutes or hours slipped by. When I opened my eyes again, the lantern still glowed faintly, the road through the mounds faintly visible under moonlight. I dared to believe I had survived the worst. Then, faint as a sigh, the silence shifted. Not a whistle, not words. Breathing. It rose from the earth beneath me, slow, deliberate inhalations, as though the soil itself drew breath. I scrambled back from the grave, pulse thundering, eyes darting. The ground shifted, crumbling softly as though something stirred below. From behind me, another sound answered, a faint whistle, broken and hollow, seeping from a stone half sunk in moss. Then another, from further ahead, and another still. The graves themselves had begun to whistle. One by one, the stones gave voice, each pitch different, together forming a grotesque melody that wrapped around me like a net. The air quivered with it, shaking the lantern flame until it guttered. I backed away, covering my ears, but the sound came not just through the air. It rose from inside my chest, vibrating in my ribs, pushing my breath into unsteady rhythm. The silence I had clung to shattered. The false safety dissolved, and when I lifted the lantern again, the figures no longer stood at the edges of the mounds. They stood among the stones, closer now, lips pursed, ready to call me by name once more. The whistling grew unbearable, shrill and fractured, pouring from the stones around me. Each grave became a mouth, each marker a flute of bone. The melody twisted together until it no longer resembled song, but a scream stretched into eternity. I staggered through the mounds, clutching the lantern like a shield. Its flame flared weakly, struggling against the tide of sound. My ears rang, blood pounding in my skull, breath forced into rhythm with the whistles until I felt like a puppet. The figures moved closer. Their steps made no sound, yet the earth quivered beneath them, faces hidden by shadow, lips frozen in that perpetual pursing. I saw now that their bodies were not flesh, but ash and dust, shapes barely holding together, strung on threads of breath. "Stay back!" I shouted, though my voice cracked, lost in the cacophony. One of them obeyed, another took a step closer, and another still appeared at my side, emerging from between the stones as though pulled from the ground itself. The lantern flickered violently. In the surge of failing light, I saw my own face staring back at me from the nearest figure. My features twisted, my mouth pursed, my eyes hollow. I screamed and swung the lantern. The glass shattered against the figure, spilling flame across its body. The dust ignited in an instant, the figure shrieking in a whistling wail as it dissolved into sparks. The others recoiled, shifting back, their chorus faltering. For the first time, silence cracked through. My chest heaved as I realized the fire was my only weapon. I snatched a burning shard from the ground, gripping it with cloth torn from my sleeve. The flames seared my skin, but I held it high, sweeping it before me. Each figure hissed as the firelight touched them, their forms breaking like smoke in the wind. I forced myself forward through the narrowing rows of graves, every step a battle against the whistling tide. The melody rose higher, faster, desperate, like the very earth begged to swallow me whole. The road appeared ahead, a pale line of gravel leading out of the mounds. Salvation. I sprinted, clutching the flame tight, lungs tearing, heart thundering. The figures lunged as one, their whistles sharpened, piercing like knives. Ropes of breath lashed toward me, invisible but suffocating, coiling around my throat, my arms, my chest. I gasped, nearly stumbling, but thrust the flame outward. The air ignited in a sudden flash, breaking their grasp long enough for me to lurch forward. I burst from the mounds onto the open road. The whistling faltered, growing distant. The figures lingered among the graves, lips still moving, but the sound no longer reached me in full force. I collapsed to my knees, gasping, clutching the burning shard until it guttered into smoke. The night air filled my lungs, sharp and blessedly silent. The bamboo road stretched ahead once more, pale beneath the moon. For the first time it looked empty. Safe. I staggered to my feet, trembling but alive. I had escaped their circle. I had broken their chorus. So why then did I still hear it? Faint. Behind me, a single whistle, my name. I forced myself not to turn back. The whistle was faint, a single note carried on the still air. But I told myself it was only memory, a trick of my mind after too long surrounded by their chorus. I walked faster. The bamboo thinned, the road widened, gravel crunching steady beneath my boots. My breath began to steady. I was leaving it all behind. Another whistle, clearer this time, ahead of me. I froze. The road stretched empty, moonlight silvering the path. Yet the sound had not come from behind. It had drifted from just beyond the next bend, waiting like a call to lure me closer. My chest tightened. If they could move ahead of me, then escape was only illusion.
I clutched the last shard of burnt wood from my lantern, though it no longer burned. My legs moved of their own accord, dragging me onward, each step heavy with dread. The bend drew closer. The whistle came again, softer now, shaping itself carefully into a pattern I knew too well. 3 notes, rising, the way I used to whistle when I was a child. And then I realized the horror. The voice that called me now was not theirs, it was my own. The market stall was small, tucked between sellers of herbs and trinkets, so ordinary that I almost passed it by. What caught me was the mask, a pale face painted with exquisite detail, its lips a soft red, its eyes alive with sorrow. The vendor smiled when I asked its price.
"It is not for sale," he said, "but it may choose you." I should have walked away. Yet something in the painted gaze held me. He pressed the mask into my hands before I could protest. The surface was warm, like living skin, and the moment my fingers brushed it, I felt a shiver race through me. That night, alone in my room, I set the mask on the table. The lantern flame gleamed against its painted eyes. I told myself it was nothing more than lacquered wood, but as the flame flickered, the mask seemed to shift. The lips parted the faintest bit, revealing the suggestion of teeth behind them, and then soft, unmistakable. I heard it breathe. I leaned closer to the mask, ears straining. The room was still, the lantern flame steady, yet I could not mistake it. The faint pull and push of air, as if lungs hid beneath the painted surface. My rational mind clawed for excuses. Perhaps the lacquer was porous, the wood expanding and contracting with the change in heat. Perhaps my imagination twisted silence into breath. I reached out, pressing my palm against the mask's lips, smooth, cool. But as I held it there, I swore I felt the faintest flutter beneath, a pulse quick as a bird's wing. I pulled back sharply, nearly knocking the lantern from the table. The mask sat motionless, eyes fixed forward, expression unchanged. I laughed nervously, the sound brittle in the quiet. It was only a trick of nerves. To prove it, I lifted the mask. It was heavier than I remembered, its inside lined not with wood, but with a texture unsettlingly soft, pliant under my fingertips. My stomach twisted. I set it down at once. Its painted eyes caught the lantern light again, and for a moment I thought they had shifted, angled slightly upward, as if following me. "No," I muttered, shaking my head. "Enough of this." I doused the lantern, plunging the room into darkness. The silence that followed was suffocating, but I forced myself into bed. Sleep would clear the mind, I told myself. Sleep would silence this nonsense. My body obeyed, sinking into uneasy slumber. Yet dreams crowded in quickly, thick and clinging. Faces pressed close in the dark, each painted white, each with lips that whispered, though I could not hear the words. I woke with a start, breath ragged. The room was still black. I reached for the lantern, fumbling for flint. My fingers brushed not wood, but something slick and warm. The mask lay on my chest, and this time its lips were moving. The mask lay across my chest, its painted lips parting, closing, parting again, like a fish learning to breathe air. I froze, too afraid even to scream. My pulse thundered in my ears, every beat louder than the last. Then came the sound, a wet click, as though a tongue scraped the roof of a mouth. Another followed, louder this time, deliberate. The mask was not only breathing, it was tasting the air. I hurled it across the room. It struck the wall with a dull thud, sliding to the floor face up. The lantern's faint embers revealed its painted smile, wider now, teeth faintly visible where before there had been only paint. I told myself it was impossible. The mask had cracked, distorted, that was all. But even as I thought it, the lips twitched again, curling upward in mockery. The room filled with faint sounds, the dragging of fabric across the floor, the whisper of fingernails on wood. I spun, heart in my throat, but nothing moved, only the mask, inching forward in jerks as though invisible hands tugged it closer. I stumbled back into the bedpost, gripping it for balance. My breath shook. Then came another sound, this one inside my head. A faint whisper, layered, echoing from the hollow of the mask. Wear me. I clamped my hands over my ears, but the voice pressed through, vibrating against my skull. Wear me, and you will be beautiful. Wear me, and you will never be alone. The mask slid further, its painted eyes glinting with feverish light. I staggered forward, snatched up the lantern, and struck flint with trembling hands until flame bloomed once more. The glow swept across the room, burning back the dark. And in that moment, the mask froze. It lay utterly still, mouth closed, expression serene. My shoulders sagged, my breath eased. Perhaps exhaustion twisted my senses, made shadows into monsters. I set the lantern back down, rubbing my temples, whispering to myself that dawn was near. But as I turned away, the room filled with the sound of breathing again. Louder, heavier, not from the mask, but from the walls themselves. The plaster swelled and sagged with each inhalation, as if the house itself were lungs. Paint cracked, dust fell in lazy spirals, the entire chamber alive with dreadful respiration. And then, from the corner where the mask lay, came a sound unmistakable. A heartbeat. The heartbeat throbbed louder, deep and steady, rattling the floorboards. I pressed myself against the bedpost, lantern raised high. Its light trembled across the walls, revealing bulges beneath the plaster, as though faces pressed outward, straining to emerge. Their outlines shifted, cheeks, noses, lips, all gasping silently in rhythm with that monstrous beat. The mask lay where I had last seen it, but its painted lips now moved in perfect sync with the pulse. The sound rolled through the room, not from wood or paint, but from something alive within. I staggered forward, desperate to seize it, to cast it into the fire, but the moment my fingers brushed its surface, heat seared my skin. The mask clung, impossibly adhesive, sucking to my palm like wet flesh. I screamed, tearing at it, but it spread upward, crawling over my wrist, my forearm. Wear me! The voice hissed, not faint now, but thunderous, layered with 1,000 whispers. You cannot resist what you already are. I slammed my arm against the wall, again and again, but the mask climbed higher. Tendrils of pale skin unfurling from its edges. They wrapped around me like veins, burrowing into pores. My skin burned, blistering as though rejecting an organ that had always been meant to belong. The lantern flame dimmed under the pressure of the sound. Every beat of the mask's heart synced with my own, forcing my pulse into unnatural rhythm. My vision swam, colours bleeding together. No! I roared, clawing at it with my free hand. My nails tore, flesh split, but the mask only tightened its hold. Its painted eyes rolled upward, revealing whites that had not been there before. They blinked, slow, deliberate, staring straight into mine. In desperation, I seized the lantern and pressed its open flame against my arm. The heat scorched, the stench of burning flesh filled the room. Pain exploded through me. For a moment, the mask shrieked, a wet, unearthly sound. The tendrils writhed, loosening their grip. I tore it free and hurled it across the room. It struck the wall, splitting plaster, and fell face down. My arm throbbed, blistered, blood oozing where skin had peeled away. Gasping, I stumbled back, clutching the wound. The heartbeat faded, leaving only the rasp of my own breath. For a moment I thought I had beaten it. Then, slowly, the mask turned itself upright. Its painted face bore no burn marks, no damage. The lips curled into a smile wider than before, teeth gleaming wet. It whispered with dreadful intimacy. You look better already.
The mask's words echoed through the chamber, long after its lips had stilled. I pressed my back to the wall, clutching my scorched arm, trembling with exhaustion. The lantern sputtered weakly, its flame too low to chase back the dark. I told myself I could leave. Throw open the shutters, leap into the night, flee the cursed store's gift and never look back. My legs shook, but I forced them beneath me, staggering toward the door. The room was silent now, the heartbeat gone. The walls no longer bulged with pressing faces. Only the smell of char and my own ragged breathing remained. I reached the door, pulled the bolt free and stepped into the corridor. It was empty, utterly ordinary. Shadows pooled in corners, the air smelled faintly of dust and damp wood. My heart eased, a fragile hope stirring. I made my way down the narrow hall, every creak of the boards a reassurance that the world had returned to normal. By the time I reached the stairs, I even dared a laugh. Bitter, broken but real. Perhaps the mask was still in my room, inert, stripped of its power. Perhaps I had defeated it.
The thought carried me down the final steps, through the inn's door, and into the cool embrace of night. The street was quiet, lanterns flickering gently in the breeze. The world looked untouched, innocent. Relief washed over me so strongly my knees weakened. I staggered to a fountain in the square and plunged my burned arm into the water. The coolness numbed the pain, soothed the trembling. I leaned against the stone, eyes closing, whispering to myself, "It's over." It has to be. For a while nothing moved. The night was mine again. But then, faintly, I heard it. A drip. I opened my eyes. The water in the fountain rippled, though the air was still. Another drip fell, not from the spout, but from above. I tilted my head back and froze. The mask clung to the wall above the fountain, upside down like a spider, its painted lips open in silent laughter. A dark liquid seeped from its mouth, dripping into the water below. I stumbled back, horror locking my breath. The ripples spread wider, distorting the reflection in the fountain, until the water mirrored not my face, but dozens, each painted, each grinning, each wearing the same skin. The fountain whispered then, in a chorus of my own voice, "Put it on." The fountain hissed with whispers, each reflection shaping my face, each urging, "Put it on." The mask clung above me, its painted eyes rolling wetly in their sockets, gaze fixed with dreadful hunger. I stumbled back, boots scraping the cobbles, water splashing at my feet. The mask detached from the wall and dropped soundlessly onto the fountain's edge. Its lips parted wider than before, revealing teeth that gleamed too sharp, too many. It spoke again, not whispering this time, but with a voice like stretched silk. "You cannot be rid of me. I'm already under your skin." My arm burned. I looked down in horror. Where the mask had latched earlier, the flesh now rippled faintly as though something stirred beneath. Pale patterns spread up my veins like lacquer bleeding through. I screamed and plunged my arm deeper into the fountain. The water hissed against it, steam rising, but the marks did not fade. Instead they writhed, curling into shapes, mocking painted features etched into my flesh. The mask leapt, not with muscles, not with wings. It slid across the air, drawn to me like iron to a magnet. I dodged aside, its edge grazing my cheek. The skin burned where it touched, leaving behind a smear of pale paint that refused to wash away. I ran, down narrow alleys, past shuttered shops, into the heart of the sleeping town. My breath tore ragged in the night air. Behind me, the mask scraped against stone, clinging and climbing with unnatural speed. Its laughter followed, high and keening, blending with the echoes of my own panicked gasps. I darted into a warehouse, slamming the door shut, barring it with a fallen beam. Darkness swallowed me, broken only by faint moonlight through high cracks. My chest heaved, body trembling. For a moment, silence. Then, scratching. Slow, deliberate, from the outside walls. The mask was circling, dragging its edges along the wood, testing every crack. I seized a rusted crowbar from the floor, knuckles white. My burned arm throbbed, paint crawling higher toward my shoulder. Each pulse of my heart quickened its spread. The scratching stopped. I held my breath. The mask slipped through the rafters above. It dropped silently, landing only a few feet from me, face gleaming pale in the dark. Its lips curved into an eager grin. I roared and swung the crowbar. Metal cracked against its surface, splitting lacquer, shards flying. For an instant, victory surged. The mask shrieked, a hideous wet scream, but the pieces twitched. Each shard writhed like living flesh, crawling across the floor, dragging themselves toward me. Where they touched, they began to melt, rejoining, reforming. Desperate, I staggered toward the furnace at the warehouse's heart. Old coals slept cold within, but tools and tinder lay nearby. I struck flint with frantic hands, sparks falling uselessly. Again, until at last, flame. The fire caught, weak but alive. I fed it with splintered wood, breath heaving, until heat flared bright enough to drive back the dark. The mask recoiled, hissing, its shards writhing violently. I seized one piece, ignoring the sear of its heat, and hurled it into the fire. It shrieked as it blackened, curling, vanishing to ash. I grabbed another and another. Each one I cast into the blaze screamed louder than the last, the air filled with the stench of burning flesh and paint. The mask, half reformed, lunged at me, latching onto my face. Its inner lining was no longer smooth, but wet, fleshy, pulsing with veins. It pressed against my skin, sealing over my mouth, my nose. "Now you are perfect," I thrashed, clawing at it, gasping for air. My vision darkened, blood roaring in my ears. With the last of my strength, I hurled myself forward into the furnace's mouth. The fire seared my skin, but I held. The mask writhed, screaming, melting into black tar. It peeled from me at last, shrieking as it burned, its painted eyes boiling into nothing. I collapsed beside the furnace, lungs raw, flesh scorched but alive. The warehouse was silent. I had destroyed it. Or so I prayed, because when I looked down at my arm, the painted veins still pulsed faintly, crawling higher, as though the mask had only planted its seed. I staggered out of the warehouse as dawn bled into the sky. The streets were quiet, the town still sleeping. My skin burned, blistered where fire had touched it, but I drew in deep, ragged breaths. I was alive. I had destroyed the mask, or so I told myself. At the fountain, I knelt and plunged my arm into the cold water, hoping to soothe the pain. The ripples spread gently, carrying my reflection back to me. For a moment, I felt relief, until I noticed the difference. The face staring up from the water was not mine. Its skin was pale, smooth, flawless, its lips red, painted, its eyes alive with sorrow, just like the mask's had been. I stumbled back, heart hammering. The reflection followed, still smiling faintly, even as my real lips trembled in horror. The painted veins on my arm pulsed once more, and then spread, crawling faster, blooming across my chest, my neck. I clawed at them, tearing skin raw, but beneath the flesh gleamed something lacquered, polished, inhuman. The reflection's lips moved in perfect unison with mine, and softly, so only I could hear, it whispered, "Now we match." It began with a notification, a chime from my phone at 2:17 a.m., sharp and unfamiliar, no banner, no text, only a signal that should not have existed. I checked the screen, blank. My inbox was empty, no app claimed the sound. Yet at the top of the display, for the briefest moment, a symbol flickered, a hollow circle, pulsing faintly as though something breathed behind the glass. I dismissed it, unsettled. Sleep claimed me again, though lightly, shallow as water. The chime returned, louder this time. I turned the phone over and found the camera already open, though I had not touched it. The screen showed my darkened room, grainy and trembling. I lifted the phone, heart quickening. The camera lens tilted, lagging half a second behind my movements, as though it were not showing me, but something watching from just behind. Then faintly, through the speakers, came a sound, not a chime, not static, breathing. I held the phone at arm's length, pulse hammering. The breathing through the speaker was steady, human, too steady, too close. I pressed the volume down until the bar reached 0, but the sound did not stop. I shut the camera app. Still the breathing continued. Panic tightened my throat. I powered the phone off, the screen fading to black. Silence returned at once, thick and absolute. My chest rose in shaky relief. A glitch, I told myself. A trick of failing hardware, nothing more. I set the phone on the bedside table and lay back, forcing my eyes shut. Minutes dragged, sleep refusing to come. My ears strained for the smallest sound, but all was still. Then the chime returned. I sat bolt upright. The phone lay dark, lifeless, screen unlit. Yet the hollow circle pulsed faintly across its surface, as though beneath the glass something stirred. I reached for it with trembling fingers. The screen flared to life on its own, camera once more open. The image showed my room, but with a subtle wrongness. The shadows leaned in strange directions, my figure blurred around the edges. And then I noticed it, something in the background that should not have been there. A second bed. I glanced around my room. There was only one. Yet on the phone's display, another bed stood in the far corner, sheets rumpled, as though someone had just risen from it. The breathing grew louder, not from the phone now, but from the room itself. I turned, slowly, every muscle rigid. The corner was empty. Only shadows pooled thick where the screen insisted another bed should be. And then faint, but unmistakable, the camera lens shifted, tilting toward me, not my hand, not my touch. Something else was holding the phone. The phone vibrated violently in my hand, as though struggling to escape my grip. The breathing grew ragged, distorted by static, filling the room until it seemed to echo from the walls themselves. On the screen, the camera feed shuddered. My room appeared twisted. The ceiling arched higher, the corners stretched into unnatural angles. The second bed remained, its sheets stirring faintly, though no one lay there. I whispered to myself, it's not real, it's just the phone. But the smell of stale breath seeped into the air, hot, damp, suffocating. I gagged, dropping the device onto the mattress. The screen did not shatter. Instead, it rolled on its own, angling toward me once more. My reflection filled the frame, pale and trembling. But behind me, on that impossible second bed, a figure sat upright. Its outline was jagged, as though built from broken pixels. Its face was obscured, blurred into static, but its chest rose and fell with each rattling breath. I spun around. The corner was empty. When I turned back to the screen, the figure had moved, closer. Its head tilted, imitating mine. The circle symbol pulsed over its chest, rhythm steady like a second heartbeat syncing with my own. The chime rang again, sharp, metallic. This time, it did not stop. It repeated in staccato bursts, faster, louder, until it merged with the breathing into one unholy rhythm. The phone's speakers crackled. A voice bled through at last, low and broken, as though forced through layers of interference. Answer. The signal. I shook my head violently, clutching my ears, but the words burrowed deeper, vibrating in my teeth, in my bones. The screen brightened, camera feed dissolving into static, then reforming into lines of text scrawled across the display. "We are already here." The lamp on my desk flickered. My laptop, long shut down, sparked to life, its screen filling with the same hollow circle. The TV in the corner glowed faintly, though it had been unplugged. Every surface became a window, each one pulsing with that same unnatural breath. I staggered back, cornered, eyes darting. The circle appeared everywhere, reflected in the glass, burned into the air. The phone chimed once more, a single note now, drawn out and low. The screen shifted back to the camera. This time, the figure did not sit on the bed. It stood directly behind me. The air thickened, heavy as wet cloth. My lungs burned with each breath, as though I inhaled static itself. The phone lay on the bed, screen facing me. The figure on it loomed directly behind my reflection, so close I could almost feel its heatless breath on my neck. I spun, lantern light flaring. Nothing. Only my desk, my scattered books, the window shuttered against the night. Yet the sensation of presence pressed harder, undeniable. On the screen, the figure tilted its head, slowly, mocking. Its blurred features stretched, pixels tearing, to reveal a mouth that wasn't a mouth at all, only a dark void widening across its face. From that void came the chime, sharp, metallic, endless. I snatched the phone, desperate to shut it off, but the screen clung to my fingers, tacky like wet skin. I pulled, panicked, but it wouldn't release. The hollow circle pulsed faster, brighter, syncing perfectly with my own frantic heartbeat. Then the camera shifted, without my hand moving. It turned, showing me not my room, but a hallway, long and unfamiliar, lined with doors. The feed swayed as though someone else held the device and was walking steadily forward. "No," I whispered. "That's not here." Yet the sound of footsteps filled the room, heavy and deliberate, echoing in time with the feed. Each step closer, each chime louder. I hurled the phone to the floor. It landed face up, screen unbroken, camera still streaming. The hallway on the display ended in a door identical to mine. The knob on my door rattled. I froze. My body refused to move, even as my mind screamed to run. The rattling grew violent, furious, then stopped all at once. I crept toward the furnace of courage I had left, seizing the desk lamp and holding it like a weapon. The phone chimed again, and my door burst open. But nothing entered. The camera feed on the phone showed what I could not see with my own eyes. The blurred figure stepping across the threshold, head tilted, void mouth yawning wider. And though the doorway before me looked empty, the floorboards bent inward, groaning under invisible weight. I swung the lamp wildly, striking only air, but sparks shot as though I had hit something solid. The air rippled, static crackled, and the chime deepened into a roar. The phone glowed brighter, the circle expanding until it filled the entire screen. And then, impossibly, a hand pressed out from beneath the glass. The hand pushed farther through the phone's glass, its surface stretching like water. I screamed and swung the lamp down with all my strength. The bulb exploded, shards scattering across the floor. The phone cracked under the blow, the screen shattering into a spiderweb of black. The chime cut off. The breathing ceased. I stood shaking in the sudden silence, clutching the broken lamp like a weapon. My heart pounded against my ribs, my breath ragged, but the air felt lighter. The static that had clung to the walls seemed to fade. I dared a step closer. The phone lay dead, its screen dark, no longer pulsing. The hollow circle was gone. Relief flooded me so hard my knees buckled. I laughed, a weak broken sound, but it felt real. It was over, just a nightmare spun by technology and sleeplessness. I swept the shards into a corner, shoved the broken device into the desk drawer, and slammed it shut. Then I collapsed onto the bed, head in my hands, whispering to myself, "It's done. It's over." For a while, nothing stirred. The quiet of my room returned, familiar, almost comforting. The faint hum of the refrigerator downstairs, the tick of the old clock, normal life reclaiming its place. I lay back, staring at the ceiling, forcing each breath to steady. Sleep tugged at me at last, heavy and irresistible. But as I drifted, a faint sound rose once more, not the chime, a low hum. I sat up, ears straining. The sound came from the walls, the outlets, the wires, a vibration deep in the bones of the house. My stomach turned cold. The lamp shards on the floor flickered faintly with static. My laptop, still shut, glowed through the lid. Even the clock face buzzed with an unnatural light. Then all at once they spoke in unison. Signal received. I bolted upright, shoving the drawer open to seize the broken phone. Its screen, though shattered, burned with white light. The hollow circle pulsed stronger than ever, larger now, expanding, until cracks split further across the glass. And through those cracks something watched me back. The light spilling from the cracked phone was no longer contained by its glass. It bled outward, crawling across the desk, dripping down the walls like liquid neon. Each pulse of the hollow circle sent waves through the air, rattling the windows, shaking my bones. The house answered. My laptop flared awake, screen filled with static. The television shrieked to life, though the plug lay coiled on the floor. The radio by the bed clicked, dials spinning of its own accord, voices cutting in and out between bursts of static, voices all saying the same thing in different tones, different languages. Answer the signal. I staggered back, clutching the useless lamp base like a club. My breath tore from my throat in ragged bursts. "No," I croaked. "No, I won't." The broken phone leapt from the drawer, smashing onto the floor. Its screen swelled outward, bulging, stretching, until the circle became a doorway of light. From within, something pressed forward, hands of static, faces of broken pixels, mouths yawning wide but filled only with noise. I bolted for the door, wrenching it open. The hallway beyond buzzed with interference, lights flickering wildly. Every bulb was a hollow circle now, every glow in rhythm with the pounding in my chest. I sprinted down the stairs, past the kitchen, where the microwave chimed in sync with the others, its display warped into the same dreadful symbol. The refrigerator rattled violently, door swinging open to reveal a glow that pulsed with the same hungry light. The entire house was infected. I slammed the front door open and burst into the night air. Cold wind lashed my face, grounding me in its purity. I ran down the street barefoot, gravel biting into my soles, lungs tearing with the effort. But the street was no refuge. Every window I passed glowed faintly with that circle, televisions and phones flickering against the glass. Street lamps above buzzed, their halos pulsing in time with the rhythm. Even the traffic lights shifted, red, amber, green, all synchronized into one endless pattern. On, off, on, off. The whole city was breathing with it. I stumbled into an alley, pressing myself against the wall, shaking, whispering frantic prayers. My own phone, I had left it behind, destroyed. Yet I could still hear it. The chime, the breathing, always closer. A payphone at the alley's end rang suddenly, shrill in the night. Its cracked receiver swayed gently. I knew I should run, but my legs rooted. The ringing burrowed into my ears until it became unbearable. Against all reason, I staggered toward it, lifted the receiver with a trembling hand. "Hello?" For a moment, nothing. Then, in my own voice, perfectly clear, "We've found you." The line went dead. The hollow circle burned across the receiver's surface, glowing brighter, spreading up my arm like fire. I screamed, hurling it away. The payphone exploded in a shower of sparks. I ran again, through back streets, across empty lots, past neon signs that flickered with the circle's shape. My chest burned, my legs shook, but I forced myself onward until the city lights dimmed, giving way to the black outline of the woods. Branches closed around me, cutting off the glow of infected lamps. The silence of nature swallowed the noise, blessed and heavy. For the first time since the nightmare began, I heard only my own ragged breath. I collapsed beneath a tree, sobbing, clutching my chest. My body trembled, but the pulse of the circle no longer filled the world. Only darkness, only quiet. I had escaped, or so I prayed, because when I raised my head, the forest around me flickered just once, faintly like a dying screen, and far off, through the trees, I saw a light pulsing in rhythm with my heart. The pulsing light in the forest drew me like a heartbeat. I told myself it was a house, a lantern, anything ordinary. But the rhythm matched mine too perfectly, each flare syncing with the pound of blood in my ears. I forced myself to my feet, stumbling through the undergrowth. Branches clawed my arms, roots snagged my feet, yet I pressed on, desperate to know what waited beyond the trees. At last, I reached a clearing. In the center stood a single phone tower, its frame skeletal, rusted with age. No wires ran to it, no signal lights marked its peak. Yet from within its hollow frame, the circle pulsed in radiant white, swelling and contracting like a lung. I froze, breath catching. The sound of static filled the clearing, faint at first, then swelling into a roar. Every tree flickered as though rendered in pixels, edges stuttering like a broken feed. My pocket vibrated. I should have had no phone. I had left it behind, destroyed it. Yet I reached into my coat and felt smooth glass. My hand emerged holding a device, flawless and new, its screen already awake. The hollow circle glowed at its center, and from the speaker came a single, rasping breath. My own.